This is the Troutbitten podcast.
Troutbitten.
Troutbitten?
Troutbitten.
Troutbitten.
Troutbitten?
Yeah, Troutbitten.
Troutbitten.
It's about trout.
Wild trout. This is Troutbitten.
This is the Troutbitten podcast, and thanks for tuning in. My name is Dominic Swantowski. I'm the owner of Troutbitten and the author of Troutbitten.com. All right, welcome back. It's season 15 of the Troutbitten podcast, and we're back with 10 episodes in the full crew format. I have the Troutbitten guys here, and I'll introduce them in a moment. So we'd like to kick off this season with a topic that makes a lot of sense for this time of year. We want to talk about fishing for stock trout. And the guys made fun of me when I said, let's talk about this. We'll get to why. But really, across the country, there are many, many rivers, creeks, streams, stocked by their state, often referred to as put and take. You know, they put the trout in and you take them out. And especially early in the season, those opportunities for stock trout can be pretty solid. Other places stock fish under catch and release regs or delayed harvest, like they're in there for a while and then maybe you can take them out in June. That's what our state does, June 15th. And then some rivers, for various reasons, really cannot support wild trout populations, and they're entirely reliant on hatchery trout. In other places, it's a mix of wild and stocked. And we kind of fish all these types of waters through the year. I know we talk about wild trout a lot. Troutbitten has always been primarily focused on fishing for wild trout because everybody here, and I think just about everyone out there listening, would more often choose a wild trout or a natural experience over a manufactured one. So I said experience there, because not only are stocked fish produced or raised in a hatchery, once they're in the river, the experience of fishing for stockies is usually pretty different than fishing for wild trout. And that is what we want to talk about tonight. In other podcasts, we've already talked a lot about sort of the value differences between wild versus stocked. We've given our preferences, and I think there are good reasons for those preferences. We've kind of gone through the hierarchy of river trout, as we put it. I have articles and we have podcasts that I'll link to in the show notes if you want to catch up on that. So upon that foundation that we've sort of already built, in continuation of those discussions, let's now talk about how our approach changes when the trout are stocked and not wild, the ones we're fishing for. Let's think about water selection, patterns, strategies, and the other things that make fishing for stock trout perhaps more successful. What changes and what is different compared to targeting wild trout? You guys ready? Everybody's out there. All right, the Troutbitten guys are here with me tonight, and let me ask each of you a question, and let me introduce you and ask you this. Matt Grobe from Montana, do you remember the first stock trout that you ever caught?
Not really. I have like vague memories of lake trout that I caught, not a specific fish, but maybe an overall experience at a very small age. I do remember the first stock trout I've caught on a fly rod, which I've mentioned on this podcast a few times, on a green weenie, sight fishing with the fly rod, early June, right before the folks came in to clean out the delayed harvest. But so, it was that stock fish, man, changed my life. In a good way, right?
Like you said, a pretty young age.
That's cool.
Trevor, what about you, bud? Dr. Trevor Smith.
Yeah. No, I don't remember the specific fish. I do remember there was a lake called Chapman Dam up in Warren that we used to fish opening day, and they stocked it with brookies. So I just remember, honestly, in my memory, every single opening day was raining and like 44 degrees. And so
you didn't have Gore-Tex either, did you?
No. So I remember getting up really early so we could get out there and get our spot on the steep bank that we always liked to fish. And that really was my origin of fishing for trout. And it's so different than what we do now, but I certainly think about it fondly, even just from the time I got to spend with my dad and my brothers.
I do too. I think about it, fondly. You had wild trout opportunities up there, though, right?
Yeah, it wasn't before we moved away from Warren when I was 12. I had already spent a little bit of time fishing small streams up in the mountains for wild brook trout.
Yeah.
And one friend of our family's in particular had a wild brook trout stream running up through their property. So that was actually the first place I caught a trout on a fly rod.
Mm.
And those were all wild.
So I grew up really in a place that had almost no wild trout. And so to me, trout fishing was for stocked trout. We didn't even talk about the fact they were stocked.
Mm-hmm.
And Matt and Deli here have pretty much the same experience or similar, I think. And I do remember my first one. It was on Plum Creek. Here, I'm spot burning. I think they still stock Plum Creek. Keystone Power Plant, right around there. And I really do. I remember it. I'd say I was 7 years old, maybe. I'd done like pond fishing. I remember it because my dad has a picture of it, I think. I think that's where I was anyway. That's why I say it that way. And I don't know. We'd go out, we'd catch 3 or 4. We were really happy if we caught our limit, which is 6 or 8 back then.
Yeah.
You know?
I think it might have been 8. It was a lot of fish.
Yeah, I do think it was 8. That's how it was. It was stocked trout fishing, and it was just trout fishing. It was opening day, surrounded. I mean, the events around opening day were a big deal. And that's, like Matt said, I'm glad for those opportunities. And I still fish for stocked trout quite a bit. We'll probably talk about this. And I was doing it the last 2 days with Aiden and some of his friends. I took them out. That was really cool. And the day before, or 2 days before, I went out by myself it's a nice time right now to go fish those stocked trout streams. There's a ton of fish in there. Some of these places are, places I don't fish most of the rest of the year because the trout are gone. Deli, I don't mean to leave you out there. Do you remember Bill Dell, do you remember your first stocked trout you caught?
No, I remember it was always an event growing up that was, because Pennsylvania, I would say, greatly publicizes, and it's like a big statewide event where you're allowed to now go fishing for trout, so to speak. It almost seemed like it, right? There's a little misinformation there, but for the most part, like growing up as a kid, that's all I knew. It's like, oh, I can go catch trout this week. You know, it's starting, because we didn't have as many wild trout streams, to be honest, I didn't even know, the trout was a trout. It was naive.
Same here. Yeah, like you say, that opening day thing is still really big around here. And Trevor, you and I are 8 miles apart or something. So we kind of have that same frame of reference. And being a doctor, I'm sure you probably have a lot of people coming up. Hey, you fishing? It's trout season now. I'm like, we've been fishing all winter, but it's still there. Like that tradition is still there. That first day. Oh, now it's trout season.
People don't even say they just say opening day. Opening day's coming up.
Or fishing season. They'll just call it fishing season.
Fishing season. Right.
The pirates suck. What are you talking about?
Someday.
It's true.
Someday, Matt. When Nutting sells the team. Someday. We'll have our branch off Pirates podcast. We have opinions.
That'd be sad.
Not going too well though.
No.
All right, so let's move into it. Let's approach this kind of like we did last fall season, with just a free-form discussion around the topic. That was fun. We had a lot of good conversations last fall. Let's do that this spring for the most part. I don't know, unless we think we want to do something else. Let's talk about what you do to catch these stocked trout. We talked a tiny bit there about the history, about our history, about that tradition around here. And they do stock a lot of streams that don't have wild trout, and then they stock on top of wild trout. I don't mind pulling those stocked ones right out of those streams. And when I want to keep fish, that's what I do, is I go target those streams where they stock on top of wild trout, and I take the stockies out of there and eat them. Really, I'd like to talk about what we do differently when you know that the trout are stocked versus when you're fishing for wild trout. And I think all of us, mostly, right, we're all fishing for wild trout way more often than stocked. But anyway, how do things change for you? Anybody want to start?
I'll jump in real quick, because I was in trout purgatory for quite a long time.
Deep Western PA, trout purgatory.
but before we get into the pattern, strategies, selection, stuff like that, I think, all of us here are big on pre-trip strategies when it comes to wild trout. And I think when it comes to stock trout, at least for when I was targeting them, it was no different. As far as what I would look at, and so a couple things I'd look at on the stock trout stuff was, One, when was the last time they stocked it?
Right.
Right. Because that stuff's a
100%.
resource.
Yep.
You can use that to your advantage, and look and see if they stock midweek. Maybe there's a sneaky opportunity in there Thursday, Friday before the masses come in on Saturday and Sunday, and you might provide you with a better opportunity to catch fish, right? And I'm not talking delayed harvests or special reg areas. I'm just talking about open water where they're suspect to the put and take a little bit more than obviously than the delayed harvest. And so that was always one of my strategies when I wanted to target one of those open waters, is just to look at that. The other thing I always would look at, and I would always hope for, is a high water event on the first day of trout season. I always thought that when there would be a high water event, and if you did your homework and the state was blown out, that often would provide better fishing in general throughout the following week than if conditions were prime, and people could sight fish for those trout. And lastly, what I'll say is I would actually try to find out if it was float stocked. I don't even know if this is a thing anymore, or just
it is.
Bucket dumped. I would always find that the rivers that had float stocking, you could actually walk away from the road and get into some quality stock trout fishing. Anyway, I would look at that stuff and have a plan before I arrived to the river, and often that would benefit me from a catching standpoint.
And then you mostly would just follow the stocking truck, right? Just right behind. Isn't that your strategy?
Right there, right behind them. Oh, they're stalking. But if you knew that some of the holes. Yeah, I can think of Dom, one of our favorites. That when you caught them there, they didn't count. But there was times where I'd look at that stocking schedule and be like, "All right, this stretch is going to be ridiculous," right? And often it was.
Hey, what's your best pattern for catching them, or tactic for? I mean, immediately after let's say the same day they stocked them.
Oh yeah.
That can be hit or miss. Well, it can be.
It could be hit or miss from a fishing standpoint, but I think. Back, I hate to say it, but a squirmy wormy was hard to beat, man.
Oh, I know, especially on the rainbows. All of them.
Well, but rainbows, I'm a squirmy wormy kind of guy.
I know.
I like a woolly bugger. Like I had a fishing trip last fall when I was in West Virginia.
Yeah.
And I kept running into people on the trail saying, did they stock yet? Did they stock yet? And I was I thought I was exploring because I thought there might be wild trout in this stream. And so when I got, I was basically walking out and I passed the stock truck driving up this trail, like driving up this like dirt road. And I was like, oh, at that point I was on the skunk. And so I was like, okay, well, I came around the bend and I could just see him porpoising, and I was like, oh, I'm gonna get the skunk off. And so
what'd you throw at him?
I threw a woolly. I think woolly bugger, just drift it and just leave it in front of their face, and they can't resist it.
Really fresh.
Yeah,
freshly. You guys ever fish a pellet fly?
I have.
A Waltz worm.
Yeah, exactly. That's what they were eating this weekend, was a waltz, with a copper bead. So I suppose they were eating a copper bead. But that it looks enough. Matt, you said you fished a pellet fly.
I have at a artificial creek that did that, and literally a dry fly.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, it's, I don't know what it is. I did it. And it caught fish and smiled.
Oh, hell yeah. Honestly, I used them on freshly stocked fish, but I never did as well as like what Bill says. Buggers and simple things. Green weenie was big for me. Anything kind of bright, let's say flash. Yeah, hare's ear. I was fishing a Waltz worm from the really big, almost the beginning. That's not true, I guess. When I first started, I was just fishing dry flies.
Sure.
Again, though, I did so much stocky fishing with minnows and redworms and stuff like that. So all my bait days, I've mentioned my uncle Brian, a lot on these podcasts. I learned a lot from him. We always fished the stock streams. That's all. Honestly, that's almost all we had. We had a Laurel Run, and we jokingly say Laurel Run a lot of times when we don't want to name the stream, but that was literally called Laurel Run. There were like 9 of them in PA, so go ahead, find this one. And what I'm saying is it wasn't all that special anyway, but it was one of the only ones where there were really tiny brook trout. And I remember catching those as a kid being like, that's all right. Let's go fish those let's go fish the stock stream, because there were bigger trout that we could keep and eat. And that was a big deal when I was a kid.
Mm-hmm.
And anyway, I fished a pellet fly. Never did that well with it. I think when they're same day put in, I think in my experience, dude, I've fished almost right behind a stocking truck. I didn't want to. I have been in the river and here comes a stocking truck. I'm like, well, let's see what happens now. And I could tell you, like, from my experience, I don't know, 3 times to maybe 3 or 4 times that happened. A lot of times, I think the trout are kind of freaked out. Imagine what they just went through.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to sit tight, maybe. Yeah.
Yeah, they're shocked,
for a couple hours. Trevor?
Yeah. No, I agree. I think they go through a little bit of shock and acclimation.
Whether it's after a fishing trip or at a backyard fire, you can bet the Troutbitten crew has a case of New Trail Broken Heels along with us. It's honestly our favorite beer. This hazy IPA is smooth and full-bodied. Hand-selected Citra hops lead to notes of bright clementine and juicy ruby red grapefruit. Broken Heels is a keeper. New Trail beer is proudly brewed in Williamsport, Pennsylvania, and delivered cold to your favorite craft beer retailer every week. At New Trail, it's not about being the best angler. It's about getting out there. So enjoy nature's moments and reward yourself for a day well fished with New Trail Broken Heels. It's Troutbitten's favorite beer. The landscape is changing for trout anglers. No doubt you've already noticed another truck at your favorite access point and seen more anglers on the water. For those looking for new challenges and fishing opportunities, Trout Routes has the data to help you avoid the crowds and explore new public water. Trout Routes has mapped more than 50,000 trout streams across the country with curated, detailed maps of public land and access points. Trout Routes has developed integrated and interactive data, putting the tools in your hands to research new water and help you navigate in the wild to know exactly where you stand in the current. It's still up to you to find those deep pools and undercuts, but Trout Routes helps you get on the water, connecting you with resources like fly shops and stream gauges for trout water across the country. Download Trout Routes in the App Store today. Then use the code Troutbitten for 20% off your membership at maps.troutroutes.com.
Egg pattern, that's another one that I've done well
good
on.
point.
Yeah. So
Color.
Color, yellow, pink, orange, that kind of, or chartreuse, like that kind of stuff just does seem to light something up in them. And it is interesting because I don't think, stock trout that are fed pellets don't really, you're kind of, you're trying to get something to them in a method that they don't have to really work for. My most recent experience fishing them, it didn't really seem to matter what it was, except that natural certainly wasn't better, but the brighter the color and the more that I drifted. I honestly, even like drifting through the strike zone often produced less strikes than drifting like mid-column.
You're talking
where they
nymph.
could just where they could just see it and it would come to them.
So will you tell us about, I'm sorry.
Yeah. No, that's okay. Yeah, so I mean there was a bunch of observations. I haven't fished really truly stocked streams in a while, and I spent a few days, and I just haven't fished that many days in a row in a while, but other things that really stuck out to me were that a lot of times fish were holding mid-column that shouldn't be, just wasting energy.
Yeah.
They were
or at least
also
feeding there. Yeah.
Feeding there, when there's no particular bug activity happening. They also, a lot of them were finding the water that probably most mimicked their hatchery conditions. So they were finding really, really slow, slack water despite warming water temps and otherwise, everywhere that I looked at, then I was like, man, this is really good wild trout water. There weren't any fish anywhere near there. They were all kind of holed up in big, deep holes or very slow moving sections where they were actually sitting ducks, and there were eagles all around making use of that, but they didn't know any better.
And not that they'd always be there, but they're pretty freshly stocked. It's only been a couple weeks, right?
Right.
3 or 4
Yeah, what do you
weeks.
think? I was going to say, what do you think that timeline looks like as far as them acclimating to some wild behaviors? Yeah.
I think one of the biggest behaviors that changes is they will move out of that water that they're used to sitting in.
Yep.
If you've never toured a hatchery, take the chance to do it. Even if you don't want to chase stock trout. It's very interesting. And I think it helps Well, to realize what that trout who's maybe 2 years old when they put them in, let's say what's legal, what do they usually start? Let's say 9-10 inches is the average here in Pennsylvania that our state is stocking. Do you think it's fair?
Yeah, 8 to 12 probably. Yeah, somewhere in there.
All right. So yeah. Do you think it's a 2-year-old fish?
I don't know.
It's more than one, isn't it?
I think they
can grow 8 to
Yeah.
9
They do grow
inches
fast.
a year.
All right.
I think it's year to year because they pretty much try to clean the hatcheries out. I
Right.
think,
I
other
don't
than
think
the
they have
breeders.
the space. Right.
Well, they definitely have, like in one of our local hatcheries here, there are two really close, and I used to take the boys through, and they'd have different, it seemed to me they'd have different year classes. I don't know if they're year classes, or these ones are just 6 months older than the other ones. They definitely, though, had some bigger ones, like what they call the trophies. You know, they put the trophy 20 inches in there that are certainly more than 1 year
The
old.
breeders.
Yeah. Well, then you got the breeders too. But seriously, there'd be big raceways full of, I mean, long raceways full of seriously like 20-inch, often palominos. Back
Looks
then
like-
they call them palominos, and now they're called golden trout.
I'm looking on the
trout.
Pennsylvania State's like
Oh, you're looking up
hatcheries
data?
website. Yeah. So
Instead of
2.5
just
to
guessing.
3.5 year old are the biggest ones. That's the
Ooh.
14 to 20 inch.
Okay.
So they max out at about 3 years. Everything's in that 0 to 3 range.
So I guess regardless, I was saying like their whole life, they have sat in generally the same kind of water. They've been grouped up together.
Mm-hmm.
And we're talking about state hatcheries too, not necessarily private hatcheries where maybe they're in a
Right,
spring pond
right.
and things. Okay. The average stock trout is what we're talking about. And they've also, been fed from above. They're often used to seeing people. And when they see people, it's like, ooh, feeding time,
Yep.
And when you tour a hatchery, you kind of realize all this, and you can be right over top of them. Sometimes walking right past will actually create a moment where all these trout are coming up. You're not even throwing the pellets in to feed them, but here they come. They're like, oh, somebody's walking by. I'm gonna eat. It's almost counter to what a wild trout would do. Not just different, but the opposite. And yeah, sure, man. Like once they get in that water and they're in a real environment after a while, then they're gonna take on some wild characteristics. But man, at first, and for me, it seems like 2 or 3 months where they're gonna act like you were talking about, Trevor, sitting in different water.
Yep.
Eating flashier things. And that's how I'm going to try to fool them. You guys think it's 2-3 months, less than that, more than that?
Yeah. I mean, I think I would see, on a delayed harvest where they stocked, I'd see maybe better hatch reaction because they've been in the water system a little bit longer. And then when you go, to a stream first day, right? And you guys, when was it? Some years I remember going first day up there and seeing quite a good Granum hatch.
Oh yeah,
right. But
that's
very
what we have right now.
rarely would I get good stock trout fishing on the Granum. I mean,
They don't know what to do with the hatch.
You're right.
Yeah.
But sometimes in the delayed harvest, I'd see a fairly decent, little black stoneflies. I remember targeting in March. And the fishing could be really good, but those fish had been in there all winter. So a couple months, Dom, I think is pretty, probably a pretty safe bet, 2 to 3 months. And then maybe they start adjusting to their natural surroundings a little more. I mean, they have to, right? They got to eat. They got to survive too.
They got to figure it out.
Yeah.
That's right. But as you said earlier, they're bred to grow quickly. And that's pretty fast to grow to 9 inches, maybe in a year.
Right.
If that is the case. Yeah, so they're more aggressive eaters. And they do pod up. You think that, you catch one, you usually catch 3, 4, or 5, right?
100%.
Trevor, you and I fished, and you brought your young son, Jack.
Yeah.
That was neat.
Yeah.
And we were on one of our favorites. And then you said the next day you were going, 2-day trip? And that's what you were just referring to, huh?
Yeah. I
Back
went
to
up
your
north
hometown.
to some of the, and it is funny because a lot of the waterways up there were originally kind of fell prey to the, to logging, and they opened them up a lot of the pollution, but then also a lot of the warming trends that you saw with opened up waterways kind of ruined the wild trout fishery. And so they're in a habit of being stocked. And it's not that there aren't wild fish in some of those waterways, it's just the time of year makes a big difference. So through the fall in, the brown trout spawning patterns, a lot of them will move into those streams that come out of larger bodies of water, like the reservoirs and things like that. But yeah, where we were fishing was delayed harvest and stocked, and it really was, you ask around where the last stocking happened and how long ago it was. And,
I know.
Yeah. And then it really, it was just sort of fascinating to me. It took me the entire 3 days to really try to deacclimate to reading water.
Yeah.
The way that I'm used to reading water.
I know.
And it felt a little bit unnatural, in a very real sense. It just felt weird it felt strange to look at really beautiful water that had a lot of really good undercut banks and habitat that our wild browns would just really love to use.
Yeah.
And yet know that, and like I said, it took me 2 days of trying before I was like, all right, well,
Don't you
right.
Wouldn't you say that's like one of the best things, like the biggest changes when you go from what you just experienced to wild trout, that there is fish behind, you get a good quality river and there's fish where there's supposed to be fish. And then when you get out of it, you're like, oh man, this sucks.
Yeah, this is terrible.
Right. That to me, man, that's the biggest factor in everything. It's like they're potted up, and it doesn't spread the anglers out. There's a lot of nuances with it I always said, back to the float stocking, I always thought, man, why don't these places float stock a little more just to spread these fish out a little better? I get it, but in an ideal world, that would happen. I think some of the rivers they do, and you can tell, especially up north of you guys, right? There's a lot of float stocking that occurs up that way.
And I mentioned my Uncle Brian. He would help sometimes float stock, and he'd be like, oh yeah, we put 5 or 6 in that hole and that undercut and this spot. And it was a small river. It was a small creek, and it was 25 feet wide at the most. In many places were 10 feet wide, and we could fish 2 or 3 miles of it. You said how stocked fish will often congregate anglers, and they're all in the bridge hole. And they're like, well, this is where they stocked them. And my uncle would know then. Well, they float stocked it, or we float stocked it, he would say, and we'd go upstream. I'll tell you the truth, especially once we were into, a month or 2 into the season, we would just go up and fish those other spots anyway. We always kind of realized, and he would acknowledge, he'd say, there's more trout down there, but there's more people. We're going upstream. We're going, and I just followed his lead. And that's how I learned to fish, was you keep moving, you keep hitting the places. And it was a cool experience. It's the same damn thing we do now. Just going upstream, just moving. A few good casts in a good spot, didn't eat. Okay, maybe there's no fish in there. Next spot might be 5 feet, it might be 50 feet, might be 50 yards. But you're hitting your spots and moving on. But I would say that's uncommon. When stocked fishing, I got something quick. My buddy Brandon Weaver, he's up in Vermont now. I finished college with him at IUP, and we would go fish one of the local spots for stock trout. And there were also 2 wild trout streams that we would fish at that time. And we were fishing one time and got out of the truck, Brandon's truck, and he just jumped right into the hole. It wasn't a bridge hole, but just right into there. And I'm like, man, I'm going upstream. He goes, this is where they're going to be. And I fought my way upstream through, the water was kind of high and it's narrow up there. And I'm like going through brush, and I think I caught, I don't even remember catching one. Maybe, I'd like to think I caught one. Maybe 2 hours later, I come back downstream, like hit the road and get back downstream to Brandon. I see Brandon's truck. I approach. I swear to God, he's standing in almost the same spot. And I'm like, man, I didn't catch anything. He's like, oh, I got my limit. And then I got like 10 more. and I swear, like right then, he's like, bam, oh, got another one. And he's like, and I was like, man, they should be up in there. And I swear to God, he looks at me and I'll never forget. And he said, Dom, sometimes when you're fishing for stock trout, it does not pay to be ambitious. Yeah. And that has always been with me. I think I wrote an article about that. It stuck with me, because as much as my Uncle Brian would say, like, just go upstream, get away. You know what? If there was nobody in that bridge hole, we probably would have fished it a lot.
Yeah. Another thing I noticed a lot was just differences in what triggered strikes. So like instead of dead drifting was not an important concept for the fish that we were fishing. It was a lot more. In fact, a lot more would eat on the movement of the swing, or if you just kind of held it there in the same place. And so again, it just kind of felt, it felt like you got rewarded for some of the things in your fishing that were maybe not ideal. They didn't really care about a dead drift. They didn't really care about a natural presentation because they didn't know what a natural presentation was. Natural to them was pellets getting thrown in the water, some of which float for a second, but a lot of which sank, right?
Good point.
Yeah.
Sometimes good angling skills doesn't get rewarded.
No, right?
No. When you're
Don't be
fishing for
ambitious.
stock trout. It's seriously though. You could be like, what the heck, man? Scratching your head. But it's important for our listeners to know that.
Yes.
Like it's okay, like it doesn't mean necessarily you're doing the wrong things because we can't confidently stay if you're applying these techniques that we talk about on the podcast.
It's not wrong if it works.
It could be the system you're fishing.
Yeah.
Right. We apply these into wild trout waters. We're very adamant in saying that. But if you listen to the podcast and you go to your local freestoner that's stocked seasonally and try this stuff, it takes fish to tango, right? I mean, sometimes there's just no fish.
I know. I said, well, 3 out of the last 4 days I've been on our stocked tributary. And it's beautiful. It is absolutely gorgeous water. There will be trout readily available in there all the way, I'm going to say through June, the end of June, most times. Then it gets too warm. I've taken the water temperature there and where it's 80 degrees. There are a few spring seeps and places like that, but 80 degrees and the water gets low and clear and warm and the trout are gone. I don't know if they die. They stock it a lot and there's a lot of harvest there. And I do some of that, right? We kept 5 and 3 and 1 on our trip yesterday. So I've been there a lot. But I mean, right away on that very, very first evening after Aiden's baseball practice, we had 2 hours left of daylight. And right away I got into that. I knew I was fishing for stock trout. Honest to God, that's what made me think about doing this podcast, because I was almost without thinking about it. I was like, well, these are stockies. And I put on brighter patterns. I had a waltz, like I said, it was like a size 12 waltz, and that was on the tag. And it had a nice bright copper bead and an orange hot spot. And then on the bottom, I had a green weenie, which is the stocky slayer, which also works for wild browns too in the right places. And I started going 45 to 45, and I was nymphing with those nymph patterns. Seriously, what I say all the time to people: be careful. That's not, it's cross lead. It's a cross lead. It's not a dead drift. No, I knew right away. I'm like, I'm on a cross lead. And then, if I was in a spot where I thought there should be fish, again, judging by looking for that right type of water, Trevor, like you said. And if they didn't eat the cross lead, then I'd give them a dead drift. They ate occasionally on a dead drift, but a couple times I don't even want to say jig it. I just 2, 3, 5 inch maybe at the most, popped it and then let it sit again and bam, then they ate it. And I did pretty well on really all 3 of those days. It was just fun because it's so far out of the norm for what I usually do. But I know that once I really got into wild trout fishing and I was around those wild trout and understanding how hard it was to convince them, you should eat this is natural. I know that it was hard for me when I'd go back to the stock trout streams. At first, it was hard for me to make that switch. But this time, I kind of recognized in myself that I was picking the right water, and it was the right water. The fish were there. And I was doing something different with not just nymphs. I put streamers on too, but we should talk about that. I feel like they don't really chase streamers too much. You can move it a lot, but not necessarily away from them. So I want to tell you about Tajima Direct. They make the best polarized lenses on the market. Tajima gives me perfectly clear vision and more detail with less eye strain, so I see more fish. The process is simple. Take a pair of your sunglasses and send them in to Tajima. In short order, you'll get your frames back with your choice of lens tints that are specifically designed for fly fishing. With both prescription and non-prescription, Tajima's patented lens technology results in the best lenses I've ever worn, including every top brand out there. So I wear polarized lenses all day, every day, on the water. And I've been rotating in Tajima's brown 15 green mirror for average light days, and their yellow-green 40 silver mirror for the cloudy low light days that I love to fish. I can tell you that for me, having Tajima's prescription lenses in the right lens tints has been a game changer. I put my glasses on, and I don't think about them again until the end of the trip. Send in your own frames today. Visit tajima-direct.com. That's TAJIMA-direct.com. Upgrade your lenses and see what you've been missing. Since 2006, Yeti has been building products for anglers who fish hard and share an addiction for the woods and the water. Yeti changed the industry with their legendary coolers by featuring rugged but simple designs built to last for generations and stand up to whatever Mother Nature might bring. Yeti now takes that same functional and elegant design to everything in their lineup, from soft coolers to drinkware, bags, and more. The new Yeti Go Box gear cases have become my daily storage solution for a life on the water. Offered in 3 sizes, the Go Boxes are rugged and waterproof at home on a boat or in the back of a pickup. All Yeti Go Boxes offer smart storage solutions with removable cargo trays and dividers. And the Pack Attic is a set of zippered pockets conveniently housed in the interior lid of the 30 and 60 sizes. Lockable, light, and nearly indestructible. I use the 15 size Go Box for camera gear and the 30 size for organizing my reels, fly boxes, leaders, tippet, and everything else that keeps me fishing. The Yeti Loadout Go Boxes are the perfect angler's companion. Deli, you're quiet, man. You're pissed about
Deli doesn't want to talk.
You're pissed about the Stocky,
Jeez.
the Stocky podcast. Look at him. He's mad.
He's miserable.
Deli was like, is this April Fool's Day?
Yeah. I said, let's do this. And Deli goes, and so it's come to this.
Come on,
So it's come to this.
If I fish streamers for stock trout, I don't really like. You basically just dangle it in front of their face, like even less movement. Like I don't know, like you're not really. It's not even a drift. It's basically a swing. You're like,
gotcha.
For the most, and I think smaller, like woolly buggers and like a regular size 6 or regular size 8.
Mm-hmm.
And just let it hang in front of their face and they'll eat it.
Well, you see a lot of that on, that river I was just talking about. Guys, if they are fly fishing, they're mostly just kind of walking, standing there, face downstream, and just kind of holding things in a spot. And maybe making the next cast, then it swings, and then it holds, and then they'll jiggle it a little bit. Yep. I don't think you're going to get them on a, quick, aggressive jerk strip too much. That's almost asking them to do too much. Something they've probably never done in their whole life. Chase down a bait fish and eat it. Right? I mean, seriously.
They've never seen a bait fish.
Right. Yeah.
I do feel like with stock trout though, you often get like some squirrels like in the mix. Like you'll have a pod.
What's a squirrel, bud?
It's just that. It's that dog that's chasing its tail in the middle of your living room. Where like you see this pod of fish, and then there's this one fish just spinning in circles, and anything that goes by, he'll come flying up out of the water and try to grab it, but he misses it. Yeah, and then he like acts scared and runs under a rock, and then it just like acting completely out of its mind. Because sometimes they just do erratic things. I don't know if something they if they're having a mental break because they got thrown in the water, in such a different environment.
Everything's different. Imagine that. I mean, imagine what they go through.
Some can't hack it.
No, some don't make it.
Yeah.
Some fall prey to many dangers.
Do you guys notice when you were talking about that, like how that fish was acting, it brought up a memory of where we were back in the would you call it, the doldrums or the
trout purgatory?
Trout purgatory. Western PA. When I would fish there, right, it was minimal tactics, right? The activity on the surface was minimal at times, but then we had a family friend who had a cabin up north, way up north central PA. Nice. And those trips in May, they were all stock fish, but man, I remember just wonderful dry fly fishing. Yes. So, how much does your region's bug life activity affect even stock trout to create better fishing than so-called, maybe a stream in southwestern PA that isn't fertile? Does that have a is that something that the listeners should be aware of as far as what their region's like?
I
I
think
think that's a fantastic point. Yeah. Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, I think I mean they're going to eventually adapt to their situation they're in.
Sure.
If you stock them in some AMD stream that has no bug life or next to no
Acid
bud
mine
life,
drainage.
yeah,
Yeah.
they're not going to acclimate. They're going to acclimate to the environment that they're put in at some point. At least the ones that survive.
Mm-hmm.
And so yeah, you're probably fishing different flies than if you were to go, like you said, into a fertile stream that has all those insects. They're going to see those are food. They're going to, through trial and error of eating things that float down the stream, they're going to determine, oh, these taste better, or, don't hurt as much when I bite into it.
Well, I've said before, I've cut open a lot of fish stomachs. I know you guys have too, but I've kept a lot of fish. And over this past 3 or 4 days, I probably kept, 15, 20 fish. I cut open all the stomachs, and I love seeing, there were beetles in there. Are there beetles out right now? Apparently, right? I would not have thought that. But that's one of the most common things I saw was a beetle that if you had to put a number on, it'd be like a size 10 or maybe big 12.
Like a water beetle? Were they water beetles, or they were like beetles?
Like a wood beetle, like a timber beetle. I don't know what to call it, like
Strange.
I know. And again, though, it was on the same stream, relatively the same areas within 2 or 3 miles each time. Strange to me. Anyway, lots of beetles, but again, lots of sticks. I'm not kidding. Sticks. Pieces of, guys will tell you about it. Like, I found bubblegum wrappers and a cigarette butt. I didn't find any of that, right? In this round of fish. But there were a lot of things that were not digestible. Lots of sticks. And I was like, what is that? And I'm looking like, and my eyes aren't as good as they used to be. And I'm looking, I'm like, what kind of nymph is that? Oh, that's just a stick. Is that a caddis case? No, that's just a stick. Lots. Yeah. So like Bill says, I mean, they're going to acclimate. They're going to figure it out. The smarter ones that don't get caught, or they get smart. I don't know if they ever get smart, but please.
No, I like Grubb's point, just that, even from north to south in PA, by the time we get stocking down here, there's hatches happening, right? Up north, you go up to the northern border of PA, there's really not much happening on the surface of the water at that time of year. But come April and May, there is. So I think all the fish, once they're given enough time, acclimate to the food sources that they're given. But if you want to be really quote unquote tactical about how you're approaching fishing for these fish, think about what's happening in your waterways and what available food sources might be there anyway for the fish. And then if you're fishing within maybe 2-3 weeks out from the stocking days, start to try to mimic that life form or those life forms.
Stock trout should be better surface feeders. If you think about it, they have been fed from overhead their whole lives. And you'll have plenty of people that would agree that stock trout in general are better surface feeders. They're just more eager because they, are genetically usually bred to grow quickly, all of that. And again, they're fed from overhead their whole lives. They should be looking up,
Yeah.
Some of our, really famous northern tiered freestoners, right, are fantastic dry fly fisheries, right? And they're mostly predominantly stocked fisheries, right?
Right. They didn't used to be, right? But as Trevor said about the timber industry, took away all that shade. But go ahead. What were you going to say?
I just was commenting that it can be, really fun, really good.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And that, I don't know how long those fish, they're not really in there any longer than their brothers and sisters throughout the state, but that particular environment creates a really, I would say like tiered stocking experience, but we almost can have a tiered stocking fishing experience, right? Some places just seem to fish better than others.
I know.
When it comes to even stock trout.
Well, you were talking about the tiers, and I mentioned in the intro about how we have broken down what we call the hierarchy of river trout in Pennsylvania in this state. And you're talking about almost having a hierarchy of stocked trout.
I mean, I can remember just traveling, up north to experience that because it felt like a better experience.
I
but
agree.
it was still
Didn't just
stock
feel like
fish,
it.
but it didn't feel as artificial, I guess, as some of the experiences I had around my local waters growing up, where it was primarily a nymph game. Water would get stagnant. I don't know. It just wasn't as good as those north central streams, or those had created some really good memories for me with prolific hatches and great dry fly fishing.
Same here.
Some of that could be that the fish are holding over. And so they're there, they're there for the next year, or maybe a year or two. And so they are more acclimated to the environment they're in. So they're going to eat. Whereas, some of the streams around here, the streams get too warm. And so the fish can't hold over. And so you're catching the fish fresh out of the bucket, where you've got more
educated stockies.
Educated stockies,
I got you. That's true. Yeah. Hey, so can we do it real quick? The hierarchy of stocked trout, because you got to put fingerlings in there too.
Yeah, fingerlings are the best, right? In my opinion.
Well, maybe a fingerling holdover.
Right.
Well,
fingerling
They're the
Fingerlings
best
about-
of this. Yeah.
I like fingerling fisheries. Like I'd prefer to catch a 9-inch fingerling that's been in your river over a 9-inch coming straight from the hatchery.
Right. You're saying the one that was stocked as 4 inches, and now it's been a year later, and now it's 9 or 10 inches. Yeah,
sure.
It is, because that's a holdover. Yeah, and they could put them in at 9 inches, and then it holds over, and now it's 12 inches or whatever the number, right? So kind of, I'd say your holdover, like Bill brought up, that's probably your top tier stocky. Is that fair?
Yeah.
I think I caught a holdover the other day. Quite honestly, though, it was still ugly. I don't mean to be, I'm not trying to be mean about stock trout. Come on. No, seriously. It was big. It was like 16 inches. And Aiden's buddy, Landon, is like, we got to keep that. I said, nah. I said, when they get that big and they're stocked, and I said, it's going to be like kind of fatty, like the you know what I mean? You ever keep a trout that's like that, and the meat's just not that good. Now, and as I was releasing it, I was like, that might be a holdover, but I still doubt it. But if it was, then the meat probably would have been better. But if they're stocked at like 16 or 18 inches, that meat has, I just say it's a lot of fat. I don't know what, I think it's fat. Trevor, you know what I mean? It's oily and fatty.
Yeah, human muscle
soft.
has the same, like our muscle can get marbled with fat. And in trout, you won't see it as much because their flesh is kind of a pale color in particular. And their adipose tissue is not too dissimilar, but you'll get it. Their fat will blend in with the muscle, and it will be a different type of muscle, because they have not been using their muscle.
No, they're like sitting on the couch, man.
Right.
They're
sitting on the
pellets.
couch, and they're eating high protein, packed calorie pellets. Yeah. So it is a different type of flesh.
I hesitate to go down this wormhole.
He's already pissed, and now we're going down a wormhole.
But do you enjoy eating them? Like, I've never found them to taste decent at all.
I think you got to flavor them up. Is my opinion about it. Like, you got to cook them
bread.
with a little bit of breading, or you do a lot of seasoning inside of them, or cook them with some bacon. Just something that gives them like a really nice, richer taste. Because I agree with you, Bill. They're pretty bland.
Yes,
on their own.
It's like cooking cardboard, and then you're flavoring the cardboard.
You fillet them or no?
Me?
Yeah,
I've been eating a trout in 2 decades.
That's it. We're going stocky fishing.
We're
going stocky fishing. We're going to grill them on the stream. I do. My uncle taught me to do it.
No kidding.
I'm pretty decent at it. You need the right knife. You cannot do it with a standard freaking kitchen knife or something. Well, you just what?
I bake
half
them. Yeah, I bake them.
But you say you flavor them up. Go ahead.
I just pack the inside, like the cavity, with lemon, typically. Yeah. Like lemon, butter, and then a mixture of spices. And it can be different every time. Sometimes, but not often.
My buddy does that with capers.
Does he?
My buddy Greg. Greg does that with capers.
Sometimes if I've got bacon, I'll put a slice of bacon inside when I bake it.
But no breading?
No, I don't usually bread them. I do put a little cayenne or some like paprika or something like that. But then if I bake them 20 minutes, something like that, like you take a butter knife, you can just you follow that line, right? Their lateral line.
Oh yeah.
You just pull the meat down.
Oh, I know.
Below
Right
that,
off.
right? Yeah, it's so easy. So I don't know. I like that better than trying to fillet them.
So I can fillet, I'm going to say like even a 7-inch trout and get almost all the meat off it. You have
That's
to have the
incredible.
right knife. It has to be super sharp and flexible, like
Okay.
pretty
I
darn
need to see
flexible.
this.
I'll show you. Again, it's what my uncle taught me. Whatever, I fillet them. I skin them too. I take the skin off. They say that's healthier, right? Because isn't the mercury like right there in the oils next to the skin?
I don't know. That's
Mercury's
also
a
where
big
the
deal. You don't want to eat mercury. That's what I've
Yeah.
been told.
Is it? Here's a question for a doctor.
Yeah.
Those stocked trout are fed dog food,
Right.
and all this. Not so like
It's literally dog food.
yeah, like
It is.
So Dom, you're flame
Is-
dog food.
Yeah.
Well,
is
but
it
I'll wait till
healthy?
they're
I
in
guess
there, yeah.
is it healthy? You know, would it be
Right.
a good idea to consume large quantities of this protein?
Yeah, I mean, stocked fish in particular. Yeah, it's like almost every piece of meat you buy from the supermarket is fed in a similar way. You know, so
Good point.
unless it's like
Very good.
grass-fed beef. So I do think it's not unsafe. Does it lack some of the nutrients that you'd get from a wild fish? For sure. I will say that stocked fish tend to have a lot lower mercury content than wild fish.
Is that
and
right?
Certainly than oceanic fish.
I guess
And
that's right.
I believe it's a bit of a misconception that a lot of it's in the skin, but I would have to double check.
I feel like he's challenging me.
Get out the microscope. It's on.
Yeah. But yeah, so I don't think there's like a health detriment. It is, at the very least, it is protein, but I don't think you're getting like that rich source of omega-3 fatty acids that you might get from a wild fish, and certainly from like a wild salmon. So yeah, it's less good for you, but it's not necessarily unhealthy.
Do you let your fish like hang out on a stringer alive in the? You should.
No.
I just read a book. It was actually Steve Vernella's book. When I don't know if Doc, if you've read his book about just the early stages and whatnot, but he commented on wild salmon and trying to make them live till like the last possible minute.
Yeah.
When then he started cooking them, and that was by far the best, right? Is to keep them alive as long as you could, and then so you should try, Dom. Keep them alive, but then cook it right in the stream on the stream side, and see,
I
see
agree
if you
with
can
that.
taste anything different.
I agree. Now, Deli says that they all taste like cardboard, and there's a big difference. I might have eaten more trout than anybody here. It sounds like, just from what I'm hearing.
I think you have a stock trout.
Well, yeah, and I've killed wild ones too. There's a big difference.
Big difference on how they taste.
I have done the stringer thing, like you're saying, and then very recently, Aiden built like a little pen on the side of the river, and we kept him there, like with rocks and stuff, right? And I think it was 2 years ago, so not that recently. But then I brought a grill, whatever, and I killed it. By the time I was filleting them, they're almost still
squirming.
twitching. You know what I mean? They're like, well, here's the end for you.
Yeah.
Anyway, I don't usually do that, keep them on a stringer, because I do feel like that's kind of inhumane.
Okay.
Although they're, it just seems kind of. So I whack them on the head. If you brain them, I do. As soon as I catch them, my uncle taught me this. You hit them on the head, right? Just whack their brain, and they're done. They'll twitch a little bit, and then they're done. I've never liked that, like put them in a bag and suffocate them thing.
I do that when I find them in brook trout streams. Smack in my head, throw them on a bank.
There you go.
Let the raccoons
Bill's mad
eat.
they stocked them on top of the brookies. That's fair.
Here you go. Have a
See?
good day, Mr. Raccoon.
That's true too. Anyway, there is a bit. And Deli brings up like they're eating dog food. Yep, that's what it is. So the longer they've been in the stream, you will absolutely notice the color of that flesh. What happens is it's like white and it's kind of soft when they're very, very freshly stocked. I try to avoid that. I try to avoid keeping them really early. Boy, if I catch a holdover, you can absolutely notice the difference. Then all of a sudden the meat is like orange. I'm not going to say it's like salmon orange red, but it's getting there. You can notice the difference very easily.
Growing up, that's what my dad was. This one's been in there a while. It's got
right.
The flesh is orange.
Yeah, dude, because it's eating real things. Yeah, that's what we would always look for. Exact same thing, Bill. My uncle would say the same thing, and I learned to kind of recognize that. And as soon as you started gutting them, you go, "Ooh, this is different fish," and they absolutely do taste differently. But like Trevor said, I'm putting a lot of flavor there. I fillet them. That takes seriously almost all the bones out, and then bread them. Well, no, dip them in egg and milk mixture, and then bread them so that the breading sticks. And the breading's got a lot of flavor. And then I put some salt in there, and then sometimes sprinkle some lemon on there. I mean, after I deep fry them. Yeah. So come on, you put any meat in that mixture, and it's great. It is. Yeah. We did it just yesterday with Aiden and his buddies.
You need to start leaving the skin on. Try them. Just try it.
I've done it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it doesn't.
Aiden likes it better that way.
Does he? Yeah. Gives a little texture.
You can still bread it. Yeah, with the skin on. Yep.
Yeah. Interesting.
Pretty cool. You guys made me hungry. I want to go kill some fish tomorrow.
I know. I'm telling you.
Though. I don't know about these stockies.
And I'm telling you, wild ones do taste better. There's just it's not even a comparison. With decades of commercial fly tying experience, Fulling Mill understands that to tie the best flies, you need the best materials. So over the past several years, they've worked hard to source and prepare a range of fly tying materials that will elevate your experience at the vise. Fulling Mill's new range includes over 1,400 products that come in a wide variety of color options. In it, you'll find the staples like marabou, bucktail, and rabbit's anchor strips, as well as products like CDC, stripped peacock quills, and 17 ranges of dubbing. New for this season, Fulling Mill has added dry fly foam products of numerous densities, sizes, and colors, as well as their new synthetic peacock, tactical peacock dubbing. All Fulling Mill materials go through a rigorous quality control process, so before they're packaged and shipped out, you can be sure they're up to the highest quality standards. Ask for them at your local dealer or find them online at fullingmill.com. Smith Creek has always been about practical, durable gear, and this season they've added 2 more products to the lineup. Smith Creek's Wade Soft EVA wading belt is soft, flexible, and built to move with you, not against you. It cinches down without pinching and holds your gear steady with a tough Duraflex buckle and accessory clip. And if you're looking for an all-purpose carrying knife, Smith Creek's new Pike Tooth Knife Kit delivers. The Japanese steel blade comes razor sharp right out of the box, precise enough for streamside tasks and tough enough for camp chores. It includes a Waterstone, wrist lanyard, and rugged neoprene sheath that's ready for trail, stream, or camping. So whether you're rigging up or dressing down, Smith Creek's got you covered. Like so many other Smith Creek products, the Wade Soft Wading Belt and the Pike Tooth Knife Kit have found a permanent home in my own fishing kit. Learn more at smithcreek.co.
Here's a question, though. And not to start a whole new discussion, but I'm just curious, like, do you think, so you guys grew up in Western PA and you talk about some of that nuance of, or the varied degrees of stock trout fishing from a more natural type experience or almost natural type experience to a more of a setup or more of a kind of manufactured experience. And is there anything, like when you have the ability to fish for wild fish, is there anything that should compel an angler to seek out the wild experience? Like, what is there anything wrong if you just spend your life fishing for the stock trout experience, and you have the wild trout experience available to you? Because we do have both here in PA, right? Not all states do have both necessarily, but
I would think, Doc, that I would feel like it's pretty rare. Like for those people that just continue to fish the stock trout thing, can't go. They wouldn't be going fishing more than like 2 or 3 times a year, is my guess. Yeah. And then like once you get a little bit of understanding, get the bug, man, we all got changed, right? I'll never forget the first time I caught a wild fish. It was at one of our local favorite limestoners, and on a prince nymph, and I was like, whoa, there was a fish behind that rock, and there should have been. Oh man, this is pretty cool, right?
Same.
I think it's just, if they're not seeking that wild trout availability, they're either not taking the sport seriously enough, or they're doing themselves a disservice, really.
I think that's a really fair point. Sorry, Bill, go ahead.
Matt, you make a really good point, and I think this is kind of what led me, like what made me more addicted to the wild trout fishing, is that I do think it's more predictable because they act like they should in the wild.
Yeah.
Where like stock trout fishing is like we said, it's basically the opposite of anything wild that you would expect.
A lot of times
it's a manufactured process, or it's a manufactured fish.
I think that's
an interesting point, Bill. Yeah.
I think that's a really important thing to kind of understand. And I do both. I'm telling you, that's what I did the last few days and all that. And I've had a lot of experience doing both. I know what I like better, but I also have a good time fishing the stockies. Just got to change the mindset. And it is sort of manufactured is fair. It's a manufactured fish. That's what it is. And then its experience has been in that manufactured environment, that is semi-controlled or very much controlled environment. All we're trying to do is match that. I enjoy both, but of course I like the wild stuff better. Matt, well, you've said it a couple times, how when you first fished, in a wild trout stream, you were like, man, there's a fish behind every rock. Dude, I had that same experience when I was 16 years old. My oldest son, Joey, just got his driver's license, and he already, like 3 days ago, he got his driver's license, and he has already gone fishing by himself one time. And I just think it's fantastic because I did the same thing. When I was 16, I was like, I'm going. And one of the first things I did was go, up to right here. I made an hour and a half drive to get to what is now my local stream. You don't need to know all my history. The point is, I came here because I knew it was a wild trout stream. Dominic Dusso, told me, hey, go fish that river. And he drew me a map. I came to here. I caught a couple that day. I also missed many others. And I just realized, like, wow, this is so different than what I'm used to. Right away, I think anybody with any fishing experience is going to realize, like, okay, this makes more sense. This is more predictable, like Bill's saying. It's a fair game.
Sure.
You know what the trout should be doing, and they a lot of times will do it. And then can you match that presentation for that wild trout who knows what it wants to eat and knows what the real things are doing? Sure. That's a tougher game. And then I'll go fish for stockies. And it's I don't even want to say, it's not always an easier game because, like Bill said, it's not as predictable.
No.
Right.
You ever wonder if it, like guys like us who grew up opposite of what someone that might have grown up where you're at now and take for granted, like what their appreciation level, I always think that my appreciation level for the wild trout is on, a different level. Yeah. And look, I'm living in a Mecca right now, and I often find some locals, like, I find like they're almost a little bit oblivious, and not in a bad way, just oblivious to what they have in their in their back pocket. Yeah. And I almost think that the way I came up, I wouldn't change it for anything, because I feel like it's made me a better angler out here than if maybe I grew up out here, and I don't know. And maybe that's wrong.
I like that.
I just think I feel like I appreciate it more and go after it differently.
I like that. I think that's a good point.
Yeah, having those experiences, man, teaches you so many different things. And not only the appreciation of it, but the ability to tackle very different circumstances. My friend Matt Mickey, he's been in touch with me through email, and he was saying that the millennial generation, his argument, is the best fishing generation. I said, you have to be careful about that word best. But his point is that we have experienced, like, all of this fishing stuff, all this trout fishing stuff, even before, let's say, bead heads became a thing on nymphs. And before any tight line mono rig stuff became popular, Euro nymphing stuff became popular, before big streamers were, 6 inches instead of what used to be big was 3 inches. And his argument is, if you got into the game, like basically in the late 80s or the 90s as a kid, now you've seen all of this stuff. You didn't have YouTube. You figured it out for yourself. You read books. And he got in touch. It was a great email. And he said, you ought to do a podcast on this.
That's pretty cool, man.
I know. And I've thought about having him on. We've talked about it, maybe just to kind of lay down his argument and then talk about it. I think it'd be pretty neat.
Greg and I were
pretty cool.
I was fishing with my buddy Greg this weekend. We actually talking about very much the same thing. Like, like the evolution of, like, he was like, when I first started, there wasn't tungsten. Like, the ability to get down was all lead. And so
split shot, yeah.
And brass too.
No, I hear you. Yeah, and that's a similar thing, Matt. It's like we all here in various kind of areas of Western Pennsylvania explored these stocked trout streams as a kid, and now we all very much have appreciated these central PA streams. Of course, now, Matt, you're out there in wild trout heaven in Montana. Yeah. So we see it, man. You know?
Yeah.
You kind of have it all. Anything else, guys? Anything else you want to say?
Yeah, I think we mentioned and we gave some good tips and pointers to our listeners that you're right. I mean, that was a big thing. We get questions, and hopefully these tactics can be taken and listened to, and hopefully you can use them on your local water, right, to catch a few more fish.
Well, Matt, you made a point maybe a half hour ago how so much of the stuff we talk about at Troutbitten, we do videos and articles and stuff too, it really applies to wild trout. And you have to kind of be careful if you're not fishing over wild trout all the time and you're fishing, let's say, over relatively freshly stocked fish.
Yeah.
Those may not be, the stuff we talk about may not be your best tactics.
Right.
Like Trevor,
right.
you experienced this past weekend.
Yeah. Yeah.
I got one for you, if I may. I was thinking about this in the last few days. Do you guys lose more trout or lose/miss more trout when they're stocked versus wild? Or is that just me?
I lose more wild trout. I feel like stockies grab it and hold on.
Interesting.
Let them run with it.
I forget to debarb my hooks.
Yeah.
So it doesn't happen to me when I'm fishing for stock trout.
You accidentally forget. Yeah. Well, all right, then I'm the only one. I'll give you my little theory on it, though. What I was thinking. I think the stock trout, this is just a half-assed theory. I think the stock trout aren't as good at capturing nymphs. I will also say, like we've been talking about, with a nymph, for example, I will purposely get a cross lead. Same thing with a streamer. Okay, I'm not moving it. Well, maybe not the same thing. Anyway, I think they're not as good at capturing prey. They don't know what it looks like yet. They
saying they're a little slow, Dom. Is that what you're trying to say?
They might be. Hey, you just have to face up to the facts. Not that there's anything wrong with that.
There's anything wrong with that.
No. Every trout is its own individual. And I don't mean to, just mischaracterize or stereotype who or what these trout are.
Yeah. I don't fully disagree.
Stocky Steve.
Yeah. I did.
You get my point though, Trevor?
Yeah, no, Bill, you were talking about fishing with a woolly bugger, and I was using one of those this past weekend a little bit. And I had, I don't know, probably 7 or 8 fish completely miss it. And I saw them swim up for it, completely miss it, never felt a thing. And then they swirled around and then spun around and scurried off. But they were very unsure what to do with, and I was moving it, so they were, and you mentioned that on a dead drift or just hanging it there is probably the way to do it, and that would have been the way to do it, but that's not what I was doing. By moving it, it was like pulling it out of their zone of awareness. They're like, what's this? This pellets don't move.
If I fish like mixed water where it's stocked in wild trout, if I ever want to catch a stocky, I feel like I just pick it up, like at the end of the drift, just let it hang there.
I know.
Mm-hmm.
And it'll just appear and stocky on.
I used to do that when my kids were really young. We went to one of the bigger waters here, and I'd put them in shallow water, and then we'd fish a little bit deeper stuff. They could stay in shallow, fish deep, and we would hang the whatever fly down below. Just kind of hold it there. And some of the fingerlings, which had now become maybe 6 or 7 inches, would eat it, and the kids got a big kick out of it. But I was like, well, what are they really learning? Well, they're learning that fishing's fun. There you go.
which is not unimportant.
No, absolutely.
We didn't,
That's right, dude.
I think I like that you've been out with your kids doing some stock trout fishing, and I've done that 3 times now with my kids too this season, and it's been valuable. I think really valuable. And I do feel better about helping them catch a stocked fish and not worrying about even the handling of it. And I'm not as worried about injuring that fish or, the process of catching, handling, letting them look at it, letting them explore it. I think it takes some of the pressure off for me.
I'll say the last thing for me. Like it's not just a kid's game either. And I know that's not what you were saying, Trevor.
No.
But like day before yesterday, I deliberately went I had 4 hours to fish, and I went to that same area, that same stock trout stream, just because that valley is so pretty. And I knew the fishing would be pretty easy. And it was. And it was different, and I wanted to keep a couple trout. And even if I didn't want to keep them, I think I probably still would have fished there, because that fishing over there is only going to be like that until about mid-June. And that's going to change. And then quite honestly, I catch smallmouth bass out of there for the rest of the year if I go there. It's unique. And people have these opportunities, these situations all over the country. And it's different. It's different. But maybe the tactics ought to change too. I think that's all we're saying.
Yeah.
Heads up.
They got off. That's something Sloop would say.
What's that? Yeah,
I slooped it because it was a stockfish.
I slooped more stockies. Yeah.
It's just a stocky. That's why I slooped it.
That's not your fault. It's the stocky's fault. He didn't know where the fly was going to go.
Got that gummy mouth.
Who's reading it out? Who's got it?
I'm on it.
Okay, sir. I changed it, by the way. I changed it
Did
a
you?
little bit for Austin. It's not much.
Okay. Because Austin's illiterate.
It's a cleaner read because Austin figured it out.
Okay.
So don't screw this up.
All right. Remember, the Troutbitten Project is a free resource for all anglers. The Troutbitten website hosts over 1,500 articles, videos, and podcasts with endless stories, commentaries, tactics, tips, and more. Find what you like through the top menu and through the search page. Navigate by way of the categories and tags, too. Be sure to find the Troutbitten YouTube channel, now featuring the Troutbitten Tips series, fly fishing the monorig, and the Troutbitten Fly Box, all in collaborations with Wild Media. You'll also find the fish and film videos and the new Riverside series, all in their own playlists on YouTube Troutbitten.
What the fuck? Wait a second. Try that again.
Stockbitten.
All in their own playlists on Troutbitten YouTube. Thank you for listening to the Troutbitten Podcast. Please give the show a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts or Spotify and leave a comment, because it really helps. Until next time, friends, fish hard, enjoy the day, and find your life on the water.
You should eat this. This is natural.
I don't know.